The Irish movement, De Valera, when he arrived, there was a small Irish group called the Irish Progressive League, which was a socialist-leaning, left-leaning small group in New York. And that had ties to the new Russian government. And to the extent that De Valera, initiated the process of seeking recognition from the Russian government. Now, the leaders in Ireland, his other cabinet members, warned against that, saying that it's all right to initiate contacts, but don't seek formal recognition from Russia until recognition is got from America for the obvious reasons.
Hello and welcome to episode 67 of the Irish Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Becker. You just heard from Patrick O'Sullivan Greene, author of Revolution at the Waldorf. Patrick was my guest in episode 66, and we will conclude our conversation on the show today. When we left things off, O'Sullivan Greene was discussing the culture in Ireland during the debate on whether to ratify the treaty to create the Irish Free State. That is where we're going to pick things up in today's episode.
I actually recently listened to the treaty debates in that young Irish Parliament, and it's a subject I don't claim any expertise on. But what I did notice on that was the respect on both sides, both pro-treaty and anti-treaty. And I can actually, and it's quite interesting now. We have, the coronation of King Charles, and there's a controversy even in England about taking the oath of allegiance. So people who are anti-treaty, I can certainly see the side of that, I can't possibly take an oath of allegiance to the English king after, fighting the War of Independence, after friends, brothers, uncles, aunts, getting killed in 1916. But equally on the pro-treaty side, it was an absolute stepping stone. And I would, see that pro-treaty side as being the path to the Republic, as the stepping stone. But being anti-treaty, I can absolutely understand, on the oath issue and on the view that you were signing away the Republic. So there was equally honorable men on both sides. Then I would come to De Valera, and he was neither pro-treaty or anti-treaty. And, I think I would have concerns that, one of the things that happened in America happened in Ireland, that there was people willing. De Valera thought he might have been the band leader, the conductor, but very often he was used and being used by other parties. In America, it was the minority faction trying to get the coup against Cohalan and Devoy. And in Ireland, it was the anti-treaty side, even though he didn't necessarily agree with all the anti-treaty. And he had given the treaty negotiators an oath in advance, and he had, which was pretty much the same as the final oath. And, as you said, he accepted the treaty in the end as the path to the Republic. It's complicated, difficult, but I wish people had more respect for both sides. Pro-treaty, seeing that the anti-treaty guys were honorable people and, fully honorable people. And also that the anti-treaty people see the pro-treaty side, that this is a way to the future of Ireland. And I think that one of the best lines of that period was by Arthur Griffith, and Michael Collins echoed it as well. It was, have we any duty to the present generation? Like, they weren't concerned about past generations and future generations. They wanted a life in Ireland for the current generation. And if I could go on a slight aside, Michael Collins became head of that pro-treaty provisional government in 1922, and he was interviewed by an American journalist, Hayden Talbot, and who actually wrote a book of the interview. And part of that interview, Collins describes how he nearly went to America in 1914 to achieve the one thing he wanted, a fair chance to get ahead. And that's sometimes lost in all the 800 years and freedom fighting. In the end, it was a chance for a group of young people to actually build their own country and control their own tax, control their own interest rate, banking policy, trade. They were the things that Collins would have been most concerned about, certainly not oaths.
All right, so trying to phrase this question in the right way is definitely a little tricky, but I want to go back to De Valera in the United States trying to get recognition from the U.S. for the Irish Republic, and then even after De Valera returned, unsuccessfully getting that recognition. There were definitely some ties between De Valera's faction, the government they tried to set up in Ireland and declare the Republic, and the Bolsheviks in Russia. And that obviously would have been a strike against them when it came to getting recognition from the United States, first from Wilson, but then through successive administrations.
To start, I mentioned about, De Valera arriving into this maelstrom that was America in 1919. And, the Bolshevik Revolution happened in 1917, or the Russian Revolution. So America was undergoing an absolute Red Scare. And, post the war as well, there were a lot of labor strikes, police, coal, steel unions all striked. And so the Irish movement, De Valera, when he arrived, there was a small Irish group called the Irish Progressive League, which was a socialist-leaning, left-leaning small group in New York. And that had ties to the new Russian government. And to the extent that De Valera, initiated the process of seeking recognition from the Russian government. Now, the leaders in Ireland, his other cabinet members, warned against that, saying that it's all right to initiate contacts, but don't seek formal recognition from Russia until recognition is got from America for the obvious reasons. But so the relationships were so close between some of the De Valera's mission that the Bolshevik government in Russia approached the Irish government, and for a loan of $20,000 was given to the Russians, with Russian jewels as collateral for that loan. And it was later in 1949 that the jewels were returned to what was then the Soviet government. But it was critical that, the relationship with Russia for Judge Cohalan, John Devoy, would have been a no-no. And, that was part of the split, that this minority group and people who spoke at at meetings of the Irish Progressive League wrote letters to the Bolsheviks in America saying, I've got great ties to the people who represent Ireland in America. So, there was an element of being used as well. So, this was all part of a fascinating, period in America that this fledgling Irish mission found itself trying to navigate the tricky waters of domestic American politics.
Being from New York and being more of a left-leaning organization, was the Irish Progressive League having something to do with James Connolly? Because I know he came over well before this and was a very popular speaker in the labor movement in New York during his time, and he started many organizations for both Irish independence and for some of these more left-leaning causes.
Yeah, what's interesting about the Irish Progressive League, it just, from the research I've done, it looks like most of the leadership and the membership were actually Irish born. So it was slightly different to the Irish American organizations, the Friends of Irish Freedom, Clon na Gael. And so, there was always, a strong, part of the strong socialist element to the Irish Revolution, from the Irish Citizens Army, etc., and, James Connolly. So I think it's only natural, and maybe it's an area that's not discussed enough or maybe studied enough, is how much of and I touched upon it, how much of the split in the movement in Irish America was related to the left or right viewpoint. And I think certainly would have been a factor. The Irish Progressive League was very aggressive in its pursuit of Irish independence in America, probably to its own detriment. Whereas John Devoy and Judge Cohalan knew how to play Washington and knew that even if you didn't like President Wilson, you don't criticize a war president at the time of war. So they stopped, whereas the Irish Progressive League continued to attack Britain and attack President Wilson during the war, which was really a strategy that was not going to play out well in the end.
You also have the book Crowdfunding the Revolution. Where is the focus different in this work than in Revolution at the Waldorf?
So Crowdfunding the Revolution is based on the funding. So the fledgling Irish government, which was established in January 1919, decided that it needed money because democracy is expensive, and in particular for propaganda, but also they wanted to set up their own industrial base and develop the resources of Ireland. And that Irish government was very, very economic focused, and largely because it was young people who wanted to get on. And for example, at the time, all trade into Ireland with the rest of the world was forced to go through English ports. Taxation that was raised in Ireland went to England and distributed back to Ireland. The banks were pretty much, banking deposits were invested in London rather than Ireland. So the new government needed funding, and so they decided to raise half their new funding. They decided to raise £500,000 at the time, of which half would be raised in America and half in Ireland. And the crowdfunding revolution concerns the fundraising in Ireland, and which is really interesting because it was a story that's almost lost to history. I remember when I was writing the book, I was telling people, because it was the first time I had written the book, I said, guys, listen, I don't know whether I can write this book or not, but I tell you the story is amazing. And I even gave up work to write this story. And so, like, the traditional viewpoint is that, Michael Collins, the Irish Minister for Finance, the head of the intelligence department, did all his work from the back of a bicycle, set up a new state, organized intelligence and military. Whereas, in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. It was an extremely professional organization. And as part of the fundraising in Ireland, despite the fundraising being illegal, they issued 400,000 prospectus, 3 million promotional leaflets, 50,000 customized letters, produced a 7-minute promotional film, which was effectively the internet of the time, and arranged to take out full-page newspaper advertisements until those newspapers were suppressed when they published the ads. So it's a fascinating story of how a bunch of young, motivated, all in their 20s, guys, girls, like the role of women in the administration is phenomenal. And I'm even working on a third project about what I call a young girl at the time, Eilish Ryan, who, there was nothing in the Irish Revolutionary period between 1916 and 1922 that she just was not directly involved in. So this is a story of young, motivated people who successfully raised the equivalent of $25 million today, at a time when if anybody was caught with and by the way, everybody who subscribed from the four corners of Ireland was given a receipt, even though if you were found with a brochure, a prospectus, a receipt, anything connected to that, you would be immediately arrested. It's a phenomenal story.
You do bring up a very underappreciated point, and that is the role that women played in the Irish Revolution. It was something that I don't think I realized fully until I was in Ireland and going to visit some of these sites. The women played a role in this revolution more than any historical, at least as much as any other major historical event I've ever researched. They are all over this story, and it's not told all the time.
So that's interesting because, we're just coming to the end of celebrating the centenary of the revolutionary period. and a huge amount of resource has gone into highlighting the role that women played in in that revolutionary period. And it certainly, I could have written Crowdfunding the Revolution by excluding women in the funding campaign in Ireland and in the government administration. If I'd written it 20 years ago, I question myself, would I have done that research? Because it was much harder to research the role of women than men, because the role of men is very much more documented. And I actually did deliberately go out of my way to look at the focus of women. And it turns out it was actually probably the most interesting part of the book. And as I said, I love the story of this Eilish Ryan. So Eilish Ryan is no different than my journey, my current niece's journey in their 20s. Country girls, move to Dublin, get a job, have a social life, get on well with their life. But she also, spent all her time working with, whether it be at the underground government, whether it was the first elections that, elected the first Dáil MPs or first Dáil TDs, the elected representatives. So, like the example I give, Eilish Ryan had a successful job. This is 1920. She had a good job. She just got promoted. As she says herself, she had bright career prospects. And Michael Collins went to her and said, would you come work for the underground Dáil government? In particular, the Department of Finance. And she said, of course. So with a blink of an eye, she just threw away her career. And that's just really hard to comprehend how somebody, I think at the time she's 24, how she did that. And by the way, the Department of Finance sounds quite grand. It was actually 2 offices above a shop on a small, narrow retail street in Dublin at the time, and only one person was allowed to come downstairs at a time and leave the building, because if 2 came down, it would have attracted attention. And they had already been raided, and Eilish would have been under constant threat of arrest.
Does that also say something not only of her personality, but also Michael Collins and the other members of the Irish government, that they were willing to reach out to women, that they didn't make this an all-boys club, that this was supposed to be an Ireland for all Irish people?
Yeah, I suppose there was an organization at the time called Cumann na mBan, which was a quasi-military organization which supported the revolution, and so it was a case of I don't think it was possible that the War of Independence could have taken place, or certainly wouldn't have been the success that came about without the support of Cumann na mBan. And there's lots of debate, and it's way outside my field of view, was there a change in the attitude to women after the treaty and in a more conservative Ireland? And it's something I'm going to investigate with Eilish Ryan, just to see this lady with bright career prospects, did they materialize? Did she marry and maybe forced to quit her job? I really don't have that detail at the moment.
Well, Patrick, I think that means when you have this next project completed, we are going to have to talk again. This was such a fantastic conversation. It was so interesting. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rick. That's been great. Cheers.
Visit irishbaseball.org for information on becoming a member of the Irish American Baseball Society, details about the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame, and updates on the Irish Wolfhounds baseball team. I'm Rick Becker, and this has been episode 67 of the Irish Baseball Podcast.